for rich fucks, while poor people are going to be getting $6 billion more in cuts to affordable housing programs, and then they're going to say the reason we're on the street is because we're dysfunctional? Fuck you. Yeah. We ain't dysfunctional. And when we go to Sacramento, we wrote our own law. If Alec can do it, we sure as hell can do it. And, you know, when you look at Jim Crow, when you look at anti-opiate laws, when you look at the ugly laws and the Basurero Treaty, and the way they've targeted communities in the past, it's these laws like standing still. They call it loitering. Sitting down. It's illegal to sit down on a sidewalk. A brother can get shot for sleeping on Cap Street. But this is not going to end by us asking for favors, by us giving charity to each other, by us asking a politician to write a bill for us. We got to change this ourselves. We got to take it out of the capitalist dialogue, out of the money dialogue, and talk about our inherent worth. Right. We as human beings deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, and if you don't treat us that way, we're going to demand you treat us that way. We are going to be the entitled poor fuckers you've been so upset about since the day the war on poverty got passed. No more intakes. This is, you know, when we first opened the shelter at Hospitality House in '83, this old guy and me and some others, we didn't need your name. We didn't need your date of birth. We had a place to crash. If there was a space, you could crash there. That's all we needed in order to provide emergency shelter. We weren't fixing nobody. We were giving our brothers and sisters in the street a place to sleep outside of the cold. Now you got to be biometric image to get a shelter bed. That ain't right. And that's only feeding a system that's going to, you know, 35 years later, we're still talking about intake systems for emergency shelter. Give me a freaking break. If I could staff an emergency shelter, anybody can staff an emergency shelter. It ain't that freaking complicated. What's complicated is for us to build strength to understand the 260 or 236 organizations that are doing the Homeless Bill of Rights campaign, their day labor programs, their housing programs, their food programs, their anti-prison industrial complex programs. There are community organizations banding together in Colorado, Oregon, and California and saying, we got dignity, we got worth. We run a transgender bill in the jails with our community members, and we win. When we push, when we demand, when we use our skills, when we use our academic resources, when we use our organizing resources, we kick ass and we win, and that's the intersectionality of this issue. Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Somebody had to curse.
Somebody had to, yeah. Massage that a bit as you prepared your report. But,
Russia today does curse, but they don't care.
Yeah, I think a number of speakers, including Paul, have really pointed out the fact that the system is working the way it's designed to.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no secret there. It's not that the powers that be are confused. They're very deliberate, and they're very intentional about how they go about this. If we look at the economic system, the legal system, the criminal justice system, the education system, the banking and finance system, the political system, the backdrop of race, class, gender, homophobia, xenophobia, with a sprinkling of religious fundamentalism, it is no surprise that we are here today. And, you know, at each level, we find that, I mean, we're being lied to, right? We're just being lied to. And if at a certain point a decision is made that a problem is not solvable, or it's intractable, or if it's gotten too big, the idea then is to make the problem seem smaller than it is. The introduction of eligibility as a concept in the 60s was designed to keep people out, right? That was the point. Our whole standard of measuring poverty in this country was made up by a researcher out of the Social Security Administration, Molly Urshansky, in the 1960s, just made it up. And that became the standard for measuring access to all of our public benefits. At some point, the point of the capitalist system is to further its own aims. Simple as that. Of course, housing is not a human right or a public good. It's a business venture. In this city, 5 corporations made $28 billion in profits last year. $28 billion. That's more than 100 times what we spend on combating homelessness in an entire year. Put another way, in 3.5 days, those 5 corporations make more in profits than we spend in an entire year combating homelessness. And then we wonder why we are not succeeding. It's not designed to succeed, right? There is money in poverty, except poor people don't have it. Our system of debt in this country, right, just shackles people with incredible burdens, ransoms their futures, and affects the choices that they make every single day. We have more than 3,000 young people serving life without possibility of parole in this country. We suspend black and brown preschoolers for behavioral problems. We have more police in our schools than we have librarians, counselors, and school nurses. That's right. The classroom has become the feeder system for our criminal justice system. We have 80% of the prosecutors nationwide who are white men. The example of Ferguson, thank you very much. The example of Ferguson, Missouri is a case study. In 1990, Ferguson, Missouri was more than 70% white and barely 20% black. Their institutions reflected that. In 20 years, it is now nearly 70% black, right, and 20% white, except the institutions did not change. And so we wonder why black people are being gunned down in the street. That is supposed to happen. We have a gifted neurosurgeon running a housing and urban development department. If Donald Trump proves anything, he proves that, yes, in this country, anyone can be president. That's not necessarily a good thing. I wanted to read a quote by the late Audre Lorde, who throughout her life had to grapple with being black, being feminist, being a woman, being queer, being anti-capitalist. We're probably familiar with the quote that there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because people do not lead single issue lives, hence intersectionality. She also said, though, that within each of us, there is some piece of humanness that knows we are not being served by the machine which orchestrates crisis after crisis and is grinding all of our futures into dust. We have an obligation to step forward. One of the challenges for our movement building is that we must be able to turn ourselves into a political force here. For better or worse, decisions are decided in the political arena. Wealthy people understand this. That is why they spend so much money trying to keep poor people from voting. So if you ain't voting, if you ain't participating in the electoral process, you are not paying attention. Clearly, voting is not the only thing we need to do, but it is a necessary thing. And we have to figure out how to make sure that we are not being pawned. We are not pawns, and they say, if you're not at the table, you find yourself on the menu. I think Bilal used that quote not so long ago. It wasn't Audre Lorde, yes. So know, just some numbers. So we have 8.5 million households in this country that are at risk of homelessness, substandard housing, paying more than 50% of their rent, and receiving no housing subsidy. Catherine Eden, a Harvard professor, wrote a book a couple of years ago about $2 a day, living on almost nothing in the United States. We have approaching 4 million people, 3 million of them children, who live every year $2 per person per day. The state of Mississippi has become almost a third world, fourth world country in the United States. We look at health access. Zip code 94124, Bayview Hunters Point, has one of the highest rates of breast cancer among African American women. African American women actually have similar incidents of breast cancer, except that they die more often than everybody else. Yes. That is an access issue. Yes. That is the economics of poverty. Increasingly, it is not only the politics of race, it is the politics of place. Increasingly, your life chances are determined not only by the color of your skin, but your parents' zip code. We are moving to a society where we will have nothing but an itinerant workforce, right? Moving from city to city, locality to locality, with no futures, no security, and no housing. Some years back, there was a meeting here in this city. A group of people got together. They wanted to test this idea that we could reaffirm our faith in fundamental human rights and the dignity of the human person, equal rights for men and women, and the principles of living in peace and being good neighbors. So the United Nations was founded here in San Francisco in 1945. Those words are inscribed on the pavement in UN Plaza that we walk over, making sure homeless people are not sitting or lying or resting. So much for being good neighbors. One of the other highlights of the United States is that a few years ago we were in the august company of Somalia as the only two countries that had failed to ratify the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Now America stands alone. We have achieved singular greatness. We are the only nation who has failed to ratify the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So if you want to do something, sir, call out the United States for its failure to ratify that convention in direct conflict with the fact that we have some 3,000 young people languishing in prison, serving life without possibility of parole. We suspend them as preschoolers, we lock them up as teenagers. In this state, if you get your child taken away from you, you're a poor black or brown person, if you ain't got a good lawyer, you ain't getting your kid back. And if you're a poor black or brown person, you don't have a good lawyer. So, let's think about what our responsibility, our debt to our ancestors, our obligation to our children.
Thank you. I have to say one more sentence or I can't face Barry when I go back up to my office.
That's why they made us go last.
And it's this. And I say this with the knowledge that after you're done here, you're going to be going out and walking around in the encampments and meeting with homeless folks. And I'm so glad that's going to be part of what you're doing. We engage those who are struggling first and foremost, not to change them, but to change ourselves. When we walk with those who are poor, we discover their inherent dignity, and that becomes the impetus to change the social structures that, although they may benefit us, they only continue to deny and disempower those struggling for justice. And I think that's really why we're here today, is to talk about those things. So thanks for letting me say that.
Great panel. If there's anything you get out of this panel or out of this forum is that United States, we're always seen as a beacon of democracy, of human rights, of good values. But out of this forum, you could say, and I would, it's like United States has been a human rights violation. Just treating how we treat each other, especially the poorest, the most vulnerable. So if you have any questions more on the panelists, you can do so. And also we have open mic, additional presentation, and also open mic after this.
Okay, I'm very keen to hear some open mic comments. Just a couple of quick comments. It's good to actually see an angry white man who's not on the far right. The other thing to say is that I come to this particular role today with a very long track record of having focused most of my life, I would say, on what we call, but you guys don't, economic and social rights. When the UN first adopted the Universal Declaration back in 1948, there was an absolute insistence that you can't have civil and political rights without economic and social rights. Because if you do, you're going to get screwed if you've just got one set. It doesn't matter which set, you're going to get screwed. And so universally, the theory and the accepted approach by virtually every country is that both of these sets of rights are important. When I come to the United States, that changes. And so the focus of my visit essentially is on civil and political rights. But that obviously doesn't capture the full picture. It doesn't do justice to the sort of issues that we're describing here. And so what I've got to try to do is to make the argument that a system that purports to respect civil and political rights but doesn't provide any economic and social underpinnings, in other words, no right to basic social protection, is not actually a system that is really protecting civil and political rights. That's the challenge. So I won't say more at this stage. I obviously appreciated hugely the different interventions, and I hope that I'll be able to do justice to some of the themes that were expressed. Thank you.
I know. Trying to find my glasses. Okay. So, good afternoon. As you know, we're running a little bit behind. So we're going to ask our timekeeper to sit here at this table. And we have at least 3 wonderful presentations short, many discussions that want UN representatives. You guys are okay to stay at about 20 minutes? Is that okay? And everyone else is okay to stay a little over? Sure. Good. So right away I'd like to have Carlos and Jose, and after that, Tiny, Sister Tiny, and then Sabrina, right here. We're going to line you guys up right here. Okay, wonderful. Okay, wonderful. So if you could look, we're not doing full open mic yet, just three presentations. Yeah. So Carlos and Jose, come up. I'm going to hand you this mic, and you're going to look 3, what did you think? 4?
3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay, 3 minutes. If you could pay attention to our timekeeper, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Carlos Potpat. Primero de Luis Demetrio Góngora, persona que vino acá a trabajar, indigente maya, que fue desalojado aquí en San Francisco de su casa, y por ese motivo estuve viviendo en la calle por cierto tiempo. Y desgraciadamente dos policías llegaron a la calle Shadwell y sin justificación alguna lo acribillaron a balazos.
I'm Carlos Polpat. I'm the cousin of Luis Góngora Pat, who was a Mayan immigrant that came to work to San Francisco and who unfortunately was murdered by two police officers on the streets, on Cap Street, while he was camping in April of 2016.
Ese día, sin justificación alguna, en menos de 30 segundos lo mataron. Lo desalojaron injustificadamente de su casa, por eso estoy viviendo en la calle. Y lo único que estamos exigiendo y pidiendo, si usted puede exponer esto en la causa aquí para las personas que se están matando por la policía injustificadamente, a la gente humilde, pobre, que trabajadora, las están expulsando fuera de sus casas, fuera de aquí, para que la gente rica esté viviendo.
Because my cousin was unjustly evicted, in part because he was unable to pay rent and because he faced the circumstances of a lot of poor working class people that end up on the streets. And since he was murdered within 30 seconds of police arrival, we really wanted to also include his death in the report as an extreme violation of people's human rights.
Yeah, definitely.
Mi nombre es José Manuel Góngora Pat, soy hermano de Luis Demetrio Góngora Pat, que fue asesinado el día 7 de abril, ahí en la calle 19 Shadwell.
I am Jose Góngora Pat, the brother of Luis Góngora Pat, who was murdered on Cap Street and 19th on April 7th, 2016.
Lo mataron brutalmente por la policía, dos policías de San Francisco, y les dio una crisis de drama familiar.
His death not only impacted the community, but impacted deeply our family here.
Y nosotros aquí estamos exigiendo justicia, que le pongan cargo a los dos policías que asesinó a Luis Demetrio.
So we've been seeking justice for the last year and a half. So there are charges against the two police officers that murdered my brother.
El DA que hasta ahora no le han puesto cargos a ninguno de los asesinatos de la policía.
And in spite of all of our advocacy and organizing, the district attorney Gascon has not done, any movement with regards to convicting these police officers.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you.
The report that they mentioned is in the packet that went to the Rapporteur staff. Everybody that sent in information went to these guys last night, so the report is with them.
It's hard being here, because I just can't believe that the public has to see it on. The public, the community. We just heard John Public, what we have to see it on. Anyway, I want to say, my name is Leroy Moore. I've been a disability activist since the 80s. I want to say that, why are we here? What are we doing here today? I ask because since '89, I and many others sat with mayors, governors, DOJs, and even over and over again. So why are we here? One, again, I've been in the political circle. I've on governors and mayor boards. I played the nonprofit game for years. Had nonprofits, been on so many boards. And once again, why are we here? The answer is we have to change the focus from what police need, what other people need, to what the community needs. You know, I Quit Hot Nation, a coalition of disabled people from around the world, raise funds on our own. It's in wheelchairs in Uganda. It ain't come from the Ford Foundation. It ain't come from the fucking UN. It came from people. You know, if we want answers about police brutality, Poor Magazine is doing it. It's not more training. We've done that since the 80s. You know, it's not catering. It's not what the police need, but the community. So I want to say one more time that, you know, also the UN Treaty on Disability hasn't been signed by the U.S. Hasn't been signed by the U.S. I just talked to the people in the Congo. They opened up their own office, people with disabilities, on their own. So once again, yeah, we can talk about laws and laws and laws, but if you're not going to implement it, then let's do what the people need. Let's do what Poor Magazine has done, homefulness. It came from people that are houseless. And they are building houses right now in East Oakland. Not one dime came from a foundation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leora. I am a poverty scholar, that houseless mama, that houseless daughter. I'm all the people you don't want to see, never want to be, look away from me. What you're going to do, arrest me? We're in your city. I am a poverty scholar, and I rock my jailhouse attire because I did the poverty crime of being houseless in these streets with my mama for years. And so I always start with verse and poetry because, as Leroy brought up, we are building a poor people, a homeless people solution to homelessness called homefulness. Like Brother Joseph talked about and Paul, we've already done non-profiteering. We've been profited off of as poor people for years, and we don't need that anymore. What we need is for wealth hoarders, which is what this country is built on, to redistribute their stolen and hoarded wealth, and to practice a theory that I created called community reparations that does not continue to perpetuate the violent act of looking away, because that's what we're taught in this society. So I started the piece called Poverty Scholar because we have actually created an alternative canon, if you will, of poverty scholarship. It is not academic, it's not a study. No matter how many times you study us, it doesn't give us a house. Okay, I'm just saying, you know, I had a little bit of an issue with the studies earlier because I've been studied and researched for years. So, you know, that never led to me and my mom not being on the street in doorways and bus shelters. It never led to me not doing 3 months in Santa Rita for the act of sleeping in our car and sleeping on the street, which is a citable offense in the stolen Ohlone streets. That said, Poverty Scholarship is something we've created, and we're actually putting out a people's textbook next year. I hope you guys get it. I published a book called Criminal Poverty. I think I sent it to Junko, the line, so you guys should check it out. But the point being is, we as poor people have our own solutions. That's what you heard. That's what you got from the beautiful RAP research who are partners with us. Poverty scholars can create our own knowledge, our own solutions, and actually manifest them. That said, I want to give you Decolonize, which is a paper, there's 2 copies. It's created by our liberation school called Decolonize Academy, which are children, homeless children in poverty who are now liberating along with us the stolen land. And I also want to name that in the process to create homefulness, we are collaborating and talking about land use in a completely different way. We collaborate with our First Nations, Indigenous Ohlone Lishan folks, because the reality is gentrification is just the 21st century notion of colonization. So if we're going to really liberate these stolen streets, we actually have to change the narrative. So I want to shout out Segurite Land Trust and the Native woman run land trust talking about actual land use. I want to talk about the ways in which we're actually manifesting a degentrification zone right now in East Oakland to make sure no more of us are on the street. I want to call out Iris Canada, a 100-year-old black elder who is dead because she was evicted in gentrification city. Can I get a witness for Iris Canada? So if you don't think this is a crisis, please understand that evicting 100-year-old people is actually levels of crisis, not to mention houseless folks on the street dying. I know I need to end, and I just want to say that as I stand here on this stolen Ohlone streets, I also want to name that one of the other pieces about what you guys maybe can do is I had the blessing of going to the Médicis Sin Frontières tour about forced from home, which I'm sure you guys know about. And they created a distinction called international displaced persons. I wrote a piece on that. International displaced persons from Sudan to San Francisco. We as unhoused people here are international displaced persons. We are refugees in this stolen Ohlone land and all of the ways in Turtle Island was colonized. And I think that maybe because you guys work on broad strokes, that one of the things you could do is create that distinction and create a different way of talking about homelessness and poverty in this particular stolen Turtle Island. Thank you. Sabrina.
Hi, my name is Sabrina Fuentes, and I have been pretty much everything except the black man on the statistics up there. And I am a survivor. I have thrived. I have done really well due to the efforts of many of the people in this room to get many of the programs started that have helped me. As a result of this, there's 6 grandchildren who have a grandmother. There is 6 children, 4 of who are contributing members of society, taxpayers, not on social services, not a part of that. All because I was able to retain some dignity in a conversation that a worker or one of these individuals from one of these programs that is being fought for today, they reached out, they spoke to me, and I felt like I was a part of humanity. One of my pet projects, my pet peeves, is individuals on the street that they seem to be incredibly mentally ill. They seem to be incredibly detached. They have lack of hygiene abilities, stuff like that. They are detached due to their state. They are not in their state because they're detached. I myself, if I was in that condition, I wouldn't want to talk to somebody. I wouldn't want to address somebody. If I was put in an office with somebody that had services to help me, I wouldn't be looking them in the eye. My goal and what I would like to see happen is somebody take that person, help them feel that they're human again, give them some dignity, and get them to where they can help themselves. Because it's the disparity between this person here and being able to walk down the street without being discriminated against and without wanting to be, a blind eye turned, I feel is a big part of the problem. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody here who's fighting for every kind of thing that helps.
Thank you, Sabrina. So we have like 6, 7 folks who want to speak, so I'm going to bring them up as soon as possible, but I know that there are more. There is an email that you can send your comments to raphome.org, WRAP. It's on the flyer. So we want to hear every voice, even though we don't have time to do so. Can I have Ron Anderson and Clark Sullivan up to the mic, please?
Clark.
Oh, there you go. And you're Mr. Sullivan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Ron Anderson. I'm from St. Mary's Center in Oakland, California. I also have a direct experience with homelessness, 1,290 days I was out there. I overcame homelessness because I was turned into a lifer, and I knew that had to be done. I was something done about that. I still go to the campus on a great daily basis. Janie mentioned the person who got arrested in the John Doe. I'm the one who got arrested in the John Doe. I want to bring to the program is that 6 deaths I witnessed out there in the encampment. And every time I turn on to the local news, I didn't hear nothing about them. And no deaths could have been avoided if they would have went to the hospital. But they were so scared to lose their tent and their worldly possessions that they sat there and just died right there in the tent. And I think that was the saddest thing, that they more fearful of losing and then dying. And I hear no account about how many people died there in the encampments. I get harassed out there on a daily basis, and I don't want to bring that to the attention. Thank you.
I got a 2 hands full here. My name is Clark Sullivan, and I'm part of a group called First That Came for the Homeless in the city of Berkeley. Currently, we are suing the city of Berkeley in federal court. We organized a poor tour where we went around the city of Berkeley, where we were continuously harassed by the city of Berkeley and the police department, where they violated our constitutional rights on 16 different occasions. If you would like more information we actually have a federal case where we're suing them for human rights violations, and I'll give you the number of our attorney, and you can talk with them further. But right now we just recently split up our camp because we had to move, and we have 3 different camps around the city of Berkeley right now. We're very well organized, and we have a code of conduct that we ask people to follow because this is a political organization, but we do take care of other homeless as well. So I'd like to thank you for being here, and we really appreciate the UN coming out. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next on the mic is Robert Aguilar and David Motorsport. Robert.
Thank you. I'd like to speak to some of the things that were discussed by the panel. I'm from Santa Clara County, which is the wealthiest county in the United States. I'm also from San Jose, which claims to be the capital of Silicon Valley. We have misfortune of having in our county Google, anyway, I can't think of all of them right now, but most of the social media companies, most of the companies that are famous now for Apple, for example, the majority of their money that they have is out of the country. So the money's not even here, but they make billions and billions, more money than what we're talking about was coming from the companies here in San Francisco. So I used to live in a place called the Jungle. It was closed on December 4, 2004, 68 acres with approximately 300 people or more that were living there. They decided to close it on December 4, 2014. And at that time, they only had housing for 200 people, but they were only able to house 144 because there is no housing available. In 2016, there were 56 deaths. In 2017, 132. This increase has shown that there's far more people that are living in the streets that are being threatened with their own lives just by being on the streets. The point-in-time count, which is done every 2 years, San Jose's went up by 7%, and they were very happy because it was such a small amount. What they didn't note was that the cities of Gilroy and Mountain View went up by over 100%, and the city of Morgan Hill, which is right next to San Jose, went up something like 700%. San Jose is also considering providing a house for Google for their new campus. They built a campus in Mountain View, which is also part of Santa Clara County. And in that agreement, they agreed to build 10,000 homes, affordable homes. So when Google decided they wanted to expand their campus, and Mountain View said no, then they rescinded their offer and no housing was built. They are offering no housing to be built at Google campus. Apple just built their spaceship with 20,000 employees and no housing for that as well. We have anti-criminalization laws, which are basically opposite of what's going on in San Francisco. People are actually trying to get arrested so they can be indoors during the cold time. And the police department is refusing to arrest people, even though they are committing crimes such as walking into a Safeway and visually
putting things into their pocket and walking out so they can get arrested, and they just take things out of their pocket and send them on their way, which is really terrible. Okay, so I'm going to bring it up. Also, you mentioned Measure HHH, which was $1.3 billion in Los Angeles. Santa Clara County passed Measure A, which is $950 million over 30 years, and that money is supposed to be used to build affordable housing. Something like $20 million out of Measure HHH money was appropriated by the police department in order to continue the sweeping processes. Another thing I want to talk about is Section 8 discrimination. People that have a voucher, such as myself, I am houseless. You have a Section 8 voucher, you have 120 days in order to which to find a place in a place where it's impossible to find places. And you have landlords that are themselves getting a subsidy because every time they write off their mortgage interest or any other improvements to their properties, that is a subsidy, and yet at the same time they're refusing to accept subsidies from people. And one last thing I want to say, I'm sorry, is that a court in Santa Monica came up with a decision that vouchers are not income because the money doesn't go directly to the person. So therefore, it is legal for them to discriminate against Section 8 and any other kind of voucher. Thank you.
David? And then after that, Veronica Shepherd.
A quick thing I think is kind of to be noted is that increasingly in this environment, people that are unsheltered, experiencing homelessness in the streets, are increasingly vulnerable to the changing environment and climate situations that we have here. So last year we had, my name is David, I'm from Alameda County Healthcare for the Homeless Program, Health Department of Alameda County, Oakland. We had to deal with increasingly weird stuff, like huge fires that filled the Bay Area up with smoke, and people that were on the streets were breathing in smoke, unhealthy levels of smoke all the time. We had to distribute face masks to people out on the streets. Extreme cold, extreme heat. 3 people died in this summer's heat emergency in Oakland and San Francisco that were living on the streets. They had nowhere to go. And then finally, the issue of hepatitis A, I think, is really important to learn about. An outbreak happened in San Diego, the first and largest outbreak of transmitted from person to person hepatitis A, a disease that normally happens in third world countries or whatever you want to call it, places that people don't have access to hygiene facilities, people that were living on the streets, no access to toilets, washing facilities, a huge outbreak, 700 people infected with hepatitis A, and it started to spread throughout the state. It's spreading, and our health department tried to get doses of vaccine to get out to the homeless encampments. The state ran out of vaccine of hepatitis A. We tried to buy it ourselves at $75 a dose out of pocket, kind of from the program, rather than using the free vaccine. It was all purchased by the large health companies to protect their patients. This is like Aetna, Blue Cross, Kaiser, etc. To stockpile, to protect their patients, housed patients, in the possibility of a larger outbreak. And that left those vectors of transmission of hepatitis A exposed and unprotected. In other words, the people that are in the encampments and the streets. Contributing to that lack of hepatitis vaccine was because most of the vaccine that's produced by these companies is done on the island of Puerto Rico. They were shut down. Finally, vaccine is starting to come in. Finally, we're out getting the vaccine back out on the streets, but late and not enough. And I think that's really telling and emblematic of our first world country.
Agreed.
Thank you, David. Good news. Ms. Nancy is going to be our final speaker of the day. Right now, Veronica Shepherd. 1 second, darling. Darnell Boyle.
There I am. Right there. Right there.
You're on the list, Darnell Boyle. Yeah. 2 minutes, sir.
I just got a question to ask. Okay, United Nations was started in 1945. Where was y'all at when we was going through all the stuff in like 2014, 15, 13? It was like the Lee administration actually in the bids, they actually went to war on us. It was so horrible out here in San Francisco. you heard all the data, but it's the human experience that was happening. This city had waged war on us so bad, it was just like being back into the war kind of 60s, except for they sprayed clean water on us. San Francisco sprayed chemical water.
That's right.
The water smelled like some kind of
I can
chemical.
see that, yep.
All the things, the police was even ridiculous. They was putting on gloves, they would come and wake you up, they would kick you. It wasn't like they would, excuse me, sir, could you get up? They would come, get up. When there's no media around, the police is brutal. It's like a military force, and I don't know how they convinced them to hate us, but they despised homeless people. I mean, it was like they were spending money on Super Bowls and kicking us to the curb. It was so brutal out here. Now, the UN is here, and now everything is like more like hidden type of secret type of stuff. It's more stealthy now. But a couple of years ago, it was all out in the open. They did not care. Nobody was coming to our rescue. It got to the point where, like now, my body is like worn down from telling my story over and over and over. But if you had came here in 2015, 2016, 2014, you would have seen a city that was waging war on the poor people. And it was brutal. It was real brutal. I mean, the statistics is real cool, but you should have been here. That's when we really needed to talk. It was brutal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bird. I want to repeat again that those who have comments can send them to the RAP's main email addresses. This is Ms. Ginger, and Ms. Nancy will be our last speaker.
Ann Fagan Ginger of Meiklejohn Civil Liberties Institute. Did you know that in November this year, the United States government owed a report to the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination? Because under President Carter, the United States Senate ratified the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and therefore the United States has a duty to file a report with that committee every so many years, and they totally ignore this. That convention is a strong document, and many, many other nations have signed it, but the U.S. did not file its report. In addition, the United States ratified the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, and the United States President signed, the Senate ratified, and the U.S. government never files a report. In addition, the United States ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. All of the rights in these we've been discussing today are mentioned in these three treaties. And no president of the United States has yet issued a report to any of these three committees. And I think it's critical that in all of our work, every time we mention the First Amendment, the Eighth Amendment, the Bill of Rights, we also mention the United Nations Charter, the Organization of American States Charter, which we've ratified, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. I think that if we had a Senate that had enough sense to ratify these, we as individuals have the duty to see now that the reports are made. And if you want any more information, annfginger@gmail.com.
Ms. Nancy. And then we'll have closing remarks from our UN representative.
Thank you. I appreciate the wisdom that I have heard today and see a lot of possibilities. And what I'm trying to do is to maybe bring something that you haven't thought of, that you might see might help. And when there are many things people think that people that have suffered run into a disqualification. Now, disqualification is not something you get a petition up about People need things right away, and they need right acting government. And the thing is that that's missing in San Francisco. That is remedies for things that need to be tended to right away for people's health and life itself.
Yes.
Now, things can be done. One of them that I found was accessible to me and might not be accessible to somebody else or a group. Hold everybody in a group, just thinking it's awful. But that is using the courts well. Now you notice that Trump runs into problems when he gets in a court situation. He doesn't lose all the time, or lose some of the time, but some of the time he does lose in courts. Where have I heard a use of court access by the people here? I haven't heard anything. One is the people are kind of scared of courts.
We are.
And I'm working on the shelter, the San Francisco shelter grievance process that is a fake process like the Wells Fargo signing up, making everybody sign up that they'd use arbitration and then use a fake arbitration. So I went to the city attorney and I asked for the information about that more than in the newspapers. I wasn't going to ask for representation, but I wanted to know all about it. And I found out about it, but even when he handed me the press packet in answer to my question, I said, your San Francisco is doing the very same thing as Wells Fargo is. Fake process. Now, and I said, San Francisco is using the same thing Wells Fargo. He said, but we're on the other side. Yes, they are. They're trying to maintain the fake process where we should be getting our remedies soon for illegal things, but we're not getting it. We have people that care about this, and they can read the law, and they know how to bring the process, and I do. I'm one of the people that can do it. I'm not a licensed attorney, but I know how it can be done, and I've won things, and the people here can win, but we need to exercise what is necessary to get the doors open, to say to the city attorney and mayor, you've done it for the wealthy that have accounts with Wells Fargo or other relations to them, but you haven't done it for the homeless. Now you have an opportunity. You have the case that is modeled, case that is not disqualified, and they don't, and I keep away from, and I know how to get out of this fake disqualification by faking fake charges on the homeless. Thank you. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Nancy. That was amazing. All right, finally, closing remarks from the audience.
Well, first of all, again, I want to say thank you to all of you for going to all the effort to present these different views. It's extremely helpful to me. I will certainly do my best, but I have to say to you that you know as well as I do that there are no magic bullets, and the UN certainly isn't a magic bullet either. The UN, which is an organization to which I report, but which I don't actually represent, plays a potentially very important role in terms of drawing international attention to the shortcomings of governments, trying to really compel them to take more seriously their obligations. But at the end of the day, the UN can't do anything. What it can do is to act as some sort of catalyst. It can work with people at the community level, people at the higher levels, and ultimately at the national level, and try to raise consciousness, try to get a more genuine commitment to the principles that are expected in human rights. So we're part of this together. It's not the UN out there which is going to do anything dramatic, but together, I think with the sort of reporting that can be done, the sort of attention that can be generated by that, combined with the grassroots activism, which is the indispensable ingredient in all of this, change can be brought about. So thank you very much.
Yay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. That concludes the forum. And so the UN Rapporteur will be actually going around visiting services and also in special the encampments to see firsthand the homelessness and the deprivation of the of caring about the homelessness. So thank you very much, and definitely the UN report, something we can use, especially we're trying to do a Right to Rest Act 2018, that this is definitely a human right violation. Thank you very much.
All right. Anyway, there you go, folks. Thank you for watching. This has been your live streamer, Freeman Sullivan, here from the St. Anthony Foundation with the UN Reporter on Human Rights. So thank the UN for coming out here. Ultimately, like you said, we know the UN can only do a certain amount of things, but hey, we solicit. Thank you. Everybody have a good day.